Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Code for Canada Showcase. My name is Jason White, and it's my privilege to be here with you today. Well, that's not quite right. Technically, like many of you, I'm always here these days, but you know what I mean. Today, I work in the private sector as the manager of privacy engineering at Shopify. But a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to take a short sabbatical with the newly formed Canadian Digital Service. There, I got to work alongside one of the very first Code for Canada fellowship teams as they worked to improve services for our veterans. My motivations and experiences may have been similar to some of those had by other Code for Canada fellows, so I'd like to share a little bit about my personal experiences with you today. First, why do people take on this challenge? Well, everyone's motivations are different. For me personally, I had long dabbled at the edges of civic tech, particularly with open data. In fact, my job application to Shopify was an analysis of the walkability of public transit systems across Canada, derived using open data. Here it is. By the way, here's the situation in Toronto, circa 2012. White is good, purple is bad. Shout out to Edmonton, 87% walkable. Halifax and Vancouver, we know you can do better. But I already had a great job that I loved, being a data engineer. This kind of dabbling wasn't enough for me to take the leap. So why do it? Well, one metaphor I've learned and like to use for growth is to consider being placed in a box. The box is big. There's lots of room in here. It's scary. There's lots of room for mistakes. Over time, you grow into the box. It's not as scary anymore. It's comfortable. You start to depend on your box. It's easy to stay there. The idea of leaving it is uncomfortable. You can be happy there. But that's the best time to move into a bigger box. It's scary all over again, but you're ready for it. And over time, you'll grow into it again. Your old box will seem strangely small. So why was I interested in working with CDS? I felt comfortable in my box, and I wanted to push myself to grow. Now, can such a short stint accomplish very much? My time with CDS was too short to complete even a small project, shorter than most Code for Canada fellowships. Instead, I tried to help them explore the art of the possible. When I arrived at CDS, I joined a small group of developers, working on several projects in parallel. I was pleasantly surprised at some of what they'd achieved in such a short time, like Wi-Fi, MacBooks for developers, team-wide Slack, sprints, retrospectives. Not what I had expected. I found my way onto a team that was working on an API for housing heating efficiency with Natural Resources Canada. The project was difficult, but not because the software was difficult to write. No, the most difficult parts were always the processes, norms, and practices. Some of these seemed to me to target software development practices that were 20 years out of date. As such, they stifled exploration and adoption of newer but proven technologies and practices. Honestly, I found this part of the job exhausting. I have a newfound appreciation for those who get through it and still deliver value for Canadians. Almost to a person, I found everyone I encountered hardworking, intelligent, and passionate about the problems they were tackling. I did notice that a large proportion of the people who were trying to push the envelope and implement some newer practices and technologies tended to have worked in the private sector for a time. That didn't surprise me. You see, in the private tech sector, it's well known that people change jobs frequently, but the contrast with the public sector is stark. In 2018, LinkedIn published a look at the average tenure of some of the most well-known private tech sector companies. Apple's average tenure was 5 years. Google, 3.2 years. Facebook, 2.5. Uber, 1.8. 1.8 years. 21 months. The average time to hire into the federal government is 7 months, or 1/3 the average tenure at Uber. Tenure in government is often measured in decades. The private sector also changes technologies frequently. Sometimes, granted, probably a little too frequently. Now, the public and private sectors have very different constraints. We can't and shouldn't expect the public sector to adapt as quickly as the private sector. That would be reckless. But it's true there's a lot of mixing of people and experiences in the private sector. New technologies, methodologies, and languages are introduced, evaluated, evolved, and discarded at a blistering pace. I think we should explore all opportunities to inject some of the benefits of these private sector learnings back into the public civic technology space. And programs like Code for Canada fellowships are such a vector. So the introduction of some new practices and technologies, was my personal goal when I went to CDS. And I hope that I succeeded in some small part. What kind of impact did it have on me? Going in, I didn't know what kind of impact my short stint would have on me personally, but it turned out the impact was more significant than I anticipated. One of my favorite experiences from my time at CDS was actually about a project that I wasn't even a part of. There was a team at CDS that was researching how to make the process of rescheduling your citizenship ceremony simpler. Not scheduling your ceremony, just rescheduling it. Talk about your narrow scope. The process worked like this. You got your invitation in the mail with your assigned ceremony date. If you couldn't attend on that date, there was an email address you could contact to ask for a new appointment, and some kind of scary legalese warning you against unnecessarily rescheduling, or you might have to start the process all over. Now, to the government workers on the other end of the email address, all they cared about was helping the other person find a more suitable date. It was completely routine for them. But the people rescheduling their ceremonies, different story entirely. Some of these people had struggled mightily to get to this point. Canadian citizenship, at enormous personal cost and risk. To risk losing it all over a scheduling issue was incredibly stressful. Imagine getting a letter and debating whether it was less risky to ask politely for another date, or maybe just delay that MRI you'd been waiting for. This profound anxiety mismatch emphasized for me that this problem was not, first and foremost, a technology problem. The team did improve the situation with some software, but a technological solution wasn't the most important fix. Just changing the tone and language complexity of the content was probably the single most effective improvement here. This realization made me more aware of the limitations of my own perspective and the solutions that I would favor as obvious. It made me less sure of myself than I had been before. It made me look for additional perspectives, use cases, possibilities. It made me question my assumptions more. I think that was a good thing. When I did return to my job at Shopify, I realized that I no longer wanted to continue in my previous role as a data engineer. I saw every day at CDS the importance that the federal government placed on protecting the personal information of Canadians. It made me want to continue working in that space and help my employer improve along those same lines. Today, I manage our privacy engineering team, where I help us respect the privacy rights of millions of our users around the world. I feel like I'm working in a box that's too big for me again. I make mistakes. I have a lot to learn. I remind myself to be comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, because that's where I will probably find the most opportunities for growth. And I can't imagine going back to my old box now. It just wouldn't fit anymore. Thanks, everyone.